Before we get started with the business of the meeting, as some of you are aware, we recently lost Commissioner Greg St. Clair to an unexpected heart attack earlier this week. I'd like to ask for everyone to take a moment of silence in recognition of Greg. Thank you. And I'd like to note, I had the pleasure of serving with Greg since the inception of the Sustainability Commission in 2014. And any of you that know Greg know that he is a personality and one also who was deeply committed to the city of San Mateo. Involved not only with this commission and the Sustainability Commission, but numerous other civic engagements and ways to support citizens around the city. He was a board member of the Fiesta Gardens Homeowners Association, representative on the San Mateo United Homeowners Association. He was a frequent participant in a number of events, including the concerts in the park, Rotary breakfasts, and any other civic event that he could be a part of and support. We are going to sorely miss Greg. I particularly appreciated his consistent attention to trying to move the ball forward on sustainability, while at the same time also being willing to and pay significant attention to various issues around the city and how they might inform how best to approach that work. So it's a big loss for us and for the city as a whole, and we extend our prayers to all of his loved ones and family. So he will be missed. With that, Cookie, if we could have a roll call, please.
Jackie Nunez.
Here.
Clifford Robbins.
Here.
Rafael Reyes.
Here.
Susan Rowinski is absent and excused.
Thank you. And I'd like to invite a motion on the minutes, please.
Yeah, no questions or comments here, so I would move approval.
I was not here last time.
So we do not have a quorum to move the minutes, so we'll need to move it to the next
Actually,
meeting.
the city clerk has said that you don't have to be here to approve the minutes, so you can go ahead and approve it.
Okay. All right. Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And with that, we move on to public comment. Cookie, do we have any slips for public comment?
No, I don't.
Okay. Thank you. And as a reminder to everyone, this public comment period is for items not on the agenda. The Commission is not able to discuss or take action on these items, but at the end of the meeting, if there is something to agendize for a future meeting, we may do so. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't see these outside. As you know, I've been interested in diversifying our water supply, and it was interesting to hear the Bosco director speak, but she's representing a particular water supply, and that's the one we need to be less dependent on. So I was thinking of the cap and the fact that gray water systems are again in the cap, but I'm not sure that every commission knows that they are to be promoted, or that's a priority for our city. For example, in 2017, I was at a planning commission meeting. Cal Water was there for approvals, very fast approvals for its new building, and essentially the director refused to install a gray water system. And I feel that if the planner and commissioners knew that that was it was an intentional goal of our city, that might have been a very different conversation. So I'm wondering if the city staff could actually look into how many gray water systems that they know about have been installed. We know that the mall addition was supposedly going to have one. I just think that's an easy action item for our city. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. Any other items?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. With that, we move on to new business and the proposed Extenet System Master License Agreement.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Tracy Scrimalia. I'm a senior engineer with Public Works. It's been a while since I've been before you. With me is Matt True. Matt's recently hired, and he's going to be helping me with processing telecom permits. We're expecting more to come in the next few months and years. And so Matt is actually here as a new employee, but I wanted to give him this opportunity to present before you tonight.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
So the agenda and the topics going to be very familiar to you because we've come to you before with 2 previous master license agreements with Verizon and with AT&T. So tonight will be very similar. It's with Extenet. The staff presentation will talk about why we want to use a license agreement as opposed to not having one, the timeline in approving the master license agreement, some of the provisions that are in it, as well as our recommendation and then the next steps. And we also have Marco Montoya here from Extenet that will be available for questions after the staff's presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Matt.
Thank you, Tracy. So I'm going to start off with just why we want to use a master license agreement for small cell companies to install small cells on our city streetlights. So currently, telecom companies can, without a master license agreement, can only install small cells on utility poles or new poles that they erect in the public right-of-way. So with a master license agreement to install small cells on our city streetlight poles, it just gives us a little bit more flexibility on where the telecom companies can install these small cells, and hopefully it gives us the ability to locate small cells to less visually obtrusive locations, as well as reduce the need for wireless companies to install their own poles and not unnecessarily add poles throughout the city. The main provisions of the master license agreement are as follows, but I'll go over them quickly. The term is for 10 years, and after that initial term, there's 15 one-year renewals. The fees for this master license agreement is $270 per pole, and that's paid annually. This $270 fee is the legal maximum that the FCC allows. So that's what's in the master license agreement. The guidelines for the RF emission testing in the master license agreement is that it must comply with the FCC standards. This is because the cities don't have the authority to set RF emission guidelines, so we just make sure that they comply with what the FCC has set. And lastly, the telecom, they still have to go through the telecom permit process. They can't just, because they have the master license agreement, install small cells on the city streetlights without going through the application process. So the majority of applications have been proposed on PG&E poles because telecoms are already authorized to use them. This has changed a little bit in the past months since Verizon and AT&T do have master license agreements already. So we've seen a little bit of a shift into a mix of applications for utility poles as well as applications for small cells on city streetlights. But hasn't been an issue. It's been going fairly well with those applications. The staff do recommend the license agreement to permit use of the streetlights so that we can choose less visually obtrusive areas for small cells to be placed. It just gives us more options. Some less visually obtrusive areas can be on street medians or at edges of parks. And one drawback to installing small cells on streetlights is that it may require additional sites because they're physically shorter than utility poles, so it might affect the coverage compared to a utility pole slightly. And this master license agreement was prepared by the city staff with help from the city attorney's office. Thank you. And if this agreement is approved, any future license agreements would still have to go through city council for approval. And if they get this master license agreement, if it's approved, they will still be subject to all city ordinance and be required to get that telecom permit. It just simply gives them more options for where they can install their small cells. So the staff recommendation is to recommend that the SNI recommend approval of the master license agreements to City Council. And if the SNI Commission do recommend approval to City Council would have the action for final approval. At that point, XNet would be able to apply for telecom permits and be required to meet all the requirements in our permit process. And these permits are approved or denied by the Director of Public Works. If any appeals do happen, it's brought to the SNI Commission as well. All right, that's the presentation. Now we are available for questions, as well as Marco Montoya from XNet.
Great, thank you. Opening it up to questions.
Thanks, Matt and Tracy. Just a brief question. The staff report said that this master license agreement was substantially similar to the previous two. I'm just wondering if there are any big changes, anything we should be aware of.
They are exactly the same. We just said substantially in case there's some minor change. Of course, the name's different. It's XNet, not AT&T and Verizon, but they are the same.
Great. And then last question, I had a chance to connect with Matt about this before, about the co-location of the small cells, given that we might see an influx of master license agreements with other telecommunication companies. And so since I had received a question about this from a community member, I asked Matt, and I asked how co-location of the small cells would impact radio frequency levels and how the city monitors that for not exceeding FCC recommended levels.
I'll let Matt answer this question.
Yeah, so if there are multiple small cells co-located on one pole, they would just have to do the RF emission study and take into account both small cell installations. So they would just have to model it as such that there's two small cells and take into account both the emissions.
Great, that's all. Thanks.
You stole my thunder, but I'll welcome you, Matt, and good to see you, Tracy. It's been a while. And yeah, that was my question, was what material differences. I came close to converting the thing to Word and doing a compare to the old ones, sort of the lawyer in me. And luckily I stopped and said, wait, I'll ask staff. So perfect. Yeah, I have no further questions because I painfully read through the first one we looked at months ago.
It's been a year.
Has it been well over a year now? Or
Not over, yeah.
July, was it?
It'll be 1 year. Feels really recent, but yeah.
Yeah, the pain. Thank you.
I have no further questions. Do we have any public comment?
No, I don't.
Okay. So I believe you're looking for a motion here. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend to the City Council to consider adopting the proposed master license agreement with the Extenet Systems.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Right. That was easy. Okay, with that, we move on to evaluation of potential trash control measures. I think this will be a little longer.
Good evening. I've met most of you. My name is Sarah Scheit. I'm the Regulatory Compliance Manager within Public Works. Tonight I'm going to talk about a study that, with help from our consultant EOA, provided an evaluation of potential trash control measures. I also have Chris Summers. He's the Vice President with EOA, and he was the lead in the project in helping us develop the report. So we have a municipal stormwater permit that I believe most of you are familiar with, and the requirement to reduce trash by 100% by 2022. This map right here represents our baseline, where the red areas represent high trash generating, yellow represent medium, and green represents low. The cross-hatched blue areas represent areas that we have either existing or planned full trash capture. So the idea would be to transform this map to all green eventually. So where we are currently, as of July 1st, 2019, we reported a 94.3% reduction in trash from the 2009 baseline map. Actually, we reevaluated that map, and I'll get to that a little bit later. The ways that we have achieved that reduction is through full capture systems, about 29.5 or 30% reduction from full trash capture. We also have an additional 10% source control credit that we receive for our plastic bag and expanded polystyrene or styrofoam ban that we have in the city. We enacted that through ordinance. And then we have over 50% reduction through other actions. So the other actions are things like our existing Team Up to Cleanup, the Adopt a Drain programs, our anti-littering and illegal dumping activities that our solid waste program conducts. They also do a lot of container management at facilities, multifamily, residential, restaurants, and the like. So I wanted to mention that the source control credits and the other types of actions are questionable as far as whether or not we will receive this level of credit moving into the next round of stormwater permitting. The Water Board has indicated that they don't want to give the source control credits, so we might lose 10% there. And the other actions that we receive are based on on-land visual assessments, meaning we go out to the areas, we look at how much trash is along the curb line, and we try to associate that level of trash with the actions that we're doing in that area. So it really is subject to what we're doing in the area and whether the wind is blowing that day and a number of other factors. So we decided to do a study to look at some ways we could enhance or add new measures or enhance measures, and also to reevaluate a 2016 study we did on full trash capture. The study also evaluates potential sources of trash and what are the best measures to deal with those particular sources. And like I said, it's going to refine our previous full capture evaluation and then presents a summary of all the different actions and several different scenarios where we could combine different measures to achieve 100%. Our analysis really covers a pretty broad spectrum of alternatives as far as responsibility for implementing the actions. The city could take the full brunt of the responsibility by installing full trash capture throughout the city. Or on the other end, we have property owner responsibility where we could sort of retroactively require properties that generate high levels of trash to install these devices on their properties. And then there are several combined methods where we sort of blend those two, and I'll talk about some of those options as we move forward. The first thing we looked at were large capture devices and areas and catchments where we could put those. Large capture devices are pretty large one-time investments, but the long-term cost for operations and maintenance is less because there are fewer of them, and you have to maintain them at maybe twice per year instead of once a month. They have a very high potential for maintaining compliance, and there's relatively no impact to the public as far as having a financial burden. We evaluated 4 new catchment areas in addition to the 6 that were evaluated in 2016. Those original 6 were associated with storm drain pump stations. This slide just gives an overall picture of the large capture systems and catchments that we evaluated. We included the 50-year life cycle cost estimates, which were very high-level estimates. We would need to further refine those if we were to choose any of these. It also lists the cost per trash reduction. So as you can see, the Poplar Golf Course location achieves the largest reduction for the smallest amount of money. So we decided to move forward with that. In fact, we are going to be beginning the design for that location this fiscal year. We also have an opportunity to work with Caltrans on that location because the catchment overlaps with some of their jurisdiction on 101 and El Camino. So they're willing to pay for almost all of it if we talk to them and enter into an agreement. We also have the Coyote Point Pump Station, large capture device that's going in as part of the North Shoreview Flood Improvement Project. So these are all the different areas where small capture devices were evaluated. There's around 619. These would be installed in catch basin inlets, as opposed to sort of end-of-pipe locations where the large capture devices would be installed. These have a much larger cost, especially for long-term maintenance, not so much for the installation of the device, because they're smaller and cheaper initially, but longer over the long-term 50-year life cycle. They also have a very high potential for compliance, and they also don't have much impact to the public. We're going to be recommending moving forward with these in strategic locations, not all 619 locations that were identified. This slide just gives an example. This is called a connector pipe screen. It's an example of a small capture device. We have these, or a version of these, installed in our downtown area. And it shows that, this is an estimate again, all these costs would have to be re-vetted and re-engineered. But the baseline cost for the 600 devices is about $1,000 a device. About $250,000 a year to maintain all of those devices. So over 50 years, that's almost $13 million. But it is a pretty large maximum potential reduction if we were to use those. Another method that we would like to use is an enhanced inspection and enforcement program. This is where we would go to where we're already going to do stormwater inspections and add some new properties that we wouldn't normally go to that have high and medium trash generating rates. And on those properties, we would work with the property owners to implement sort of institutional controls where they would sweep their parking lots, fill out a log sheet every day, basically keep their own properties clean to the equivalency of having full capture on that property. We would also look into modifying our authority and our enforcement response plan so that we might eventually be able to require full capture on those sites when they don't comply. We would also use a lot of outreach and education at these sites, and it would have a shared burden with the private businesses for compliance. Sunnyvale uses this program, and they've had a fairly good success rate so far. So just an example of the cost of this program, to add an inspector, it would take about a half of an inspector, a full-time inspector, to go out and do all the additional properties that we would want to do. And it would add the on-land visual assessment component to all of those inspections. It would add additional properties to be inspected. and it has the potential to produce a pretty large reduction as well, at 38% estimated. So I mentioned the option of us requiring retroactive full trash capture device. Sorry about that. If we were to require retroactive trash capture devices on properties that generate medium or high trash, this would be a fairly large impact to the property owners. We did not calculate the specific cost to the property owners. Are we having problems?
We're back.
Okay.
We had a little gap there.
Okay. I was saying we didn't evaluate the cost for the property owners. However, we could estimate that it would cost them about $1,000 per device per inlet if they went with the small devices, and there's about 112 properties. So they would also have to do operations and maintenance on those devices. We also currently have our new and redevelopment projects that we require full trash capture to be installed on larger developments already as part of our conditions of approval, similar to what we do for green infrastructure. As you know, the City Council has made an enhanced public outreach program a priority for dealing with trash, litter, cigarette butts. So Public Works is working with the city manager's office right now to develop a campaign that will increase general awareness as well as promote our existing programs like Team Up to Clean Up and Adopt a Drain. We'd also like to eventually be able to highlight our downtown cleaning program if we bring that in-house, which I'm not sure if we voted to do yet. Things we're also considering doing are promoting businesses to take more of an ownership by filling out a pledge card. We could also extend that option to individual homeowners. So it's estimated that this could result in about a 5% reduction. So the City Council as well, just last week I believe, decided to make single-use plastic food serviceware ordinance a priority. So I met with the city manager's office yesterday, and we're going to be working together on this. And starting next fiscal year, city manager's office will be leading an outreach program to get the word out through the city, and then we would bring that back to the commission and to council with the results and to get further direction on how to proceed with that. The county recently adopted an ordinance as well, where they're taking a similar approach, and many other jurisdictions around the county are also considering this option. This slide represents just a summary. I'm not going to go into detail. It just presents a summary of all the different measures that were evaluated, lists the potential maximum, which are, I want to add, not additive. It really depends on how you implement each action and in what combination with other actions gets you these results. The 50-year life cycle cost estimates are based on some assumptions that we would need to work on refining with the consultant once we decide on a path forward. The costs are really just used for a comparison of the options, not for creating, operating budgets or capital improvement budgets. So in summary, the path forward that we would like your input on includes installation of one large capture device at the Poplar Golf Course catchment, further study on where we might use small capture devices. Those would be in focused areas, maybe where some of the other measures aren't working as well over the years. We might also consider eventual small devices for private property as part of our enhanced trash inspection and enforcement program. That's a mouthful. And we would also combine that effort with public outreach and hopefully get a cooperative, business-friendly approach with that inspection and enforcement program as well. And we would also like to consider plastic food serviceware ordinance as part of the menu that we would like to proceed with. So I think that's all I have, and I would like to welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Why don't we open it up to commissioner questions?
I don't want to steal your thunder this time.
Oh, go ahead. Just shut me down. Why not?
All right. All right. Thanks.
I'm paying you to do this, I think.
Thanks, Sarah. I noticed in the report that there was mention of municipal street sweeping program, and I'm just wondering why the staff recommendation was to not include that. Was it a cost, or because I noticed that there was a large potential reduction with that?
Sure. So the street sweeping program is one of those options that is measured visually. We don't get a, credit per curb mile swept at this point. It also works best when it is combined with the curb inlet screens. So moving into the next iteration of the permit, if it looks like the water board is going to consider allowing some studies that have sort of demonstrated that those options are the equivalent of full trash capture, then we would definitely want to reevaluate that at that time. Right now, it would probably be hard to get that through, considering how hard it was to get the recent street sweeping changes through that we made. It would require more enforcement, more ticketing out there for the public, maybe an additional sweeper over time. I think the costs that were in the study were probably a little underestimated as well.
Right. And so what I'm hearing is that we're recommending not to include both the curb inlet screen implementation and the street sweeping because they go kind of hand in hand, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the water board is still considering studies that would show how much source credits we would get for that, right?
They may consider sort of approving the studies that have been done that demonstrate it is the equivalent of full trash capture, but they haven't done that so far.
Okay, got it. And then for private properties for small trash capture, is there any incentive-based approaches that you know of or that other jurisdictions have implemented? And I'm thinking specifically of potentially a cost-sharing program, given that option seems to be pretty effective.
I'm not aware of any cost-sharing options. I think incentives would be for them to keep their areas clean and possibly sign up for, a program we might initiate, like a business pledge where we would be able to promote them somehow on the website or, here at the commission, give them some type of recognition. But I have not heard of any jurisdictions giving credits or giving grants or that type of thing.
Sure.
I know that where they did implement this in Hercules and Pinole, I don't know the details on it, but I heard it hasn't gone over very well. Maybe Chris can add a little more to that if you'd like to hear.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Yeah. And then lastly, so there's a remaining to be determined percentage portion of the pie, right, of how we're going to achieve our stormwater permit. And so given the staff recommendation that is still to be determined, what options do we have for that remaining piece of the puzzle?
Well, we currently are going to be installing that large capture device that's going to get us 12%. Mm-hmm. So if nothing changes, we'll be in compliance just by installing that device.
Okay, great. And then lastly, it sounds like the disposable foodware ordinance isn't going to, in the future, count towards our trash load reduction, but would it apply for this time, by 2022?
How that would apply by 2022 is if the Water Board decides to continue with the source credits, that would be written into the next version of the permit, which technically should be effective January 1st, 2021.
Okay.
Also, we would measure, ideally those types of trash would be removed from the loading. So when we're out there doing our visual assessments, I believe that 15% came from, 15% of the trash out there that we're seeing is that type of trash. Mm-hmm. So if you remove it, we would get a 15% reduction based on what we're seeing out there.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Sarah.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Are we currently fining individuals, owners, private property owners for their littering, basically, the trash?
We are not fining them. I don't think I've had any instances where we fined a private property for trash, but we do have the capability of charging them for noncompliance should it reach that point.
So we do have the city has authority to, as part of its enforcement, to levy fines.
It's called a failure to comply. It's in the fee schedule. Basically, if we've gone out there 3 times and they still haven't done what we've asked them to do, we charge them a failure to comply. We also have citation authority and authority to levy different types of amount. I would have to look into what all the different mechanisms are.
Just to add to that, one of the things that I think we propose is coming back at some point with any proposed modifications to the authority. We do have an enforcement document that dictates how we go about enforcing against different types of violations, right? Right now, it's not written around trash. It's written around stormwater, I think, more than anything else. So to the extent that that requires modification in order to bolster this part of the trash capture plan, then we would be making those modifications. We haven't redlined them at this point. We're really sort of making sure that we have concurrence, with the commission, that's something that we want to do. And we think it has a good probability of success. And it's sort of I say it's not an incentive, it's a disincentive maybe, but it's iterative, right? And so the people that are going to get fined are the ones that have had outreach and communication, and it's a data-driven process rather than it being a blanket requirement for everybody. So I think that was kind of the intent, and if we need to recraft that a little bit to make it more focused around trash, we would do that.
I would support that. I share the idea that incentives are great, but this is also, I guess, the principle's burden benefit. I mean, these are folks that are basically using the public right of way to trash it, and then the city has to pay. All of us have to pay to clean it up, and they shouldn't. And I would actually consider. I know we're getting beyond questions here, comments. I like the idea of adding capture devices. I can see how people would resist. On the other hand, if there's a fairly robust enforcement process going on, and people know that they can get relief from it by installing and maintaining a local capture device, they may say, great, I pay $1,000 now and I got to clean it out once a month, but they'll stop coming around and slapping my wrist with the ruler.
We figured it would be better to be on that side of the argument than on the proactive side of requiring people to install them in the absence of data saying that there's a problem there, right? And which is what other communities tried to do and are having a hard time with. So this way we're catching the bad actors, and those that are actually doing their own housekeeping, that's the incentive, is do good housekeeping, and you won't hear from us. You won't get fined, and you won't have to do the installation.
Makes good sense.
And we are already requiring it on major remodels, so we're going that way anyway with any new development.
Yeah, so it's a remediation or mitigation that an existing place could do if they've already been zapped with fines, as a way to get out instead of just wearing an ankle bracelet or something. Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. A couple more questions. Do we have an analysis of types of trash and sources? So,
We
what's the
do.
composition and where is it coming from?
I believe we have a pretty good idea of that it's described in attachment B. It's the second part of the trash evaluation that EOA did for us. We did analyze the types of trash, where the different types of trash are coming from and what the best measures to control those types of trash would be.
Attachment B. Okay. All right. I'll have to look for that. Oh, I see. Okay. And you mentioned on the properties, 112 properties, and were these identified based on the visual assessments?
112 properties that are high or medium trash generating, over 10,000 square feet. Some of them were reassessed as part of our baseline map reassessment, and it was also based on properties that have storm inlets on site that don't drain to the public right away.
I see. Okay. Then, with regards to the small capture devices, presumably these would be most effective if also coupled with additional public engagement like the storm drain program and then sweeping as discussed earlier, right? So presumably we're looking at those as a system.
The small trash capture devices, yes, you are still going to see litter on the street, and you will until the rain washes it into that inlet and we remove it before it gets to the receiving water body. So yes, ideally we would use those, only where we really need to. The inlet screens are the ones that are in combination with street sweeping. So we would still continue with, the other programs that we've always been doing, the container management, the illegal dumping enforcement, our inspection program as it is, the outreach and education. Am I answering your question?
Maybe I'm probably not phrasing this properly, but the inlet screens, I think that's really what I meant.
Okay.
They're going to collect a certain amount of trash there, and if we have an active, adopt a drain, and those have inlet screens, right, then those would be the logical places where you want people to adopt those to keep those clean, right?
That would make sense.
So aligning those in some way, identifying, priority spots would seem to be something that we should aim for. And can you, I'm a little bit confused, going back to the permits and the percentages that you had on the first slide. Can you bring that up again? So are these reductions essentially estimated annual reductions, and then but 100% is compliance for the permit? Is that how this works?
These are the reductions that were calculated based on the last fiscal year's worth of work.
And what's the requirement with regards to permitting?
The requirement was that we meet 80% by July 1st, 2019.
And that's from the 2009 baseline?
Correct. Although we did, as part of this study, we went out to some of the areas, some of the private properties that were previously high and medium trash generating, took another look at those, and we were able to change some of those to green as part of reassessing our baseline. So those were areas that we weren't doing any actions, but they were originally categorized like broadly categorized based on the land use and what we would expect to find there. And it turns out they weren't really red, they were green. So the baseline map, yes, that's what this is compared to.
I see. Okay, thank you. And with regards to ordinance on single use, can you comment on how such an ordinance might relate, if at all, to compostable single use?
I have not fully looked at the ordinance that the county has. I know that compostable plastic, I believe, is something that they're not allowing because it's sort of a misnomer in that compostable plastic is not really compostable unless it's at a compost facility. Like it's going to take a really long time for that to break down. So other types of compostable materials, but not compostable plastic.
Right. Okay. And obviously there are a lot of details there, but there's obviously a difference between petroleum-based plastics and bioplastics and things like that. And so I think that's probably an area that merits some careful attention, because we don't want to dissuade also bioplastics use where appropriate. And so minimizing first use makes sense, in addition to also encouraging bioplastics where possible.
And I doubt this is going to be the last time in the next year you're going to hear about this ordinance. And I think you're going to find that they're going to divert the trash control and the ordinance are going to diverge as topics, although they're obviously mutually supportive.
Right.
But that one obviously has a big impact to businesses downtown. I think the city manager's office will be leading that and will be obviously involved as well, supporting that sustainability-wise. So, yeah, I think it's to the extent that we can implement it, we get credit for it, up to 15%. And the nuances are, there are details there that we're going to have to work out, both business impacts and the technical parts of what we actually allow. So I'm sure we'll be talking more on that topic. I did want to point out also that it is a memorandum. I don't have it as a page number in your agenda. It's page 106 is the starting of the memo that documents the sources of trash in your agenda package. So if you want to refer to that, you can go through, and it talks about the different sources and the quantities and whatnot.
Great. Thank you.
And one thing on just to add on the inlets is the reason we are focusing on those as opportunistic, if you will. Right now, we install the next trash capture device based on last year's data. We go from 94 to 90% capture to 94% plus 12%. I can't do that in my head because even though I'm an engineer. And so we're over 100%, right? But we don't know what next year's assessment is going to bring us in terms of the other variables. So we have a toolbox, essentially, if you will, and we can go find those hotspots and actually get additional capture as we go forward. The downside is they're very high maintenance, right? And that takes staff time, it takes equipment, and when you're intercepting trash in the gutter, it also leads to potential flooding if not done well, right? So it's on the high end of O&M, it's on the high end of labor, it's on the high end of risk, if you will, to impacting residents in terms of their operations, compared to either on property or in a pipe down at the end of the watershed. So we're choosing that one. We want to be very careful. And we just don't think, even though there's a large percent opportunity there, that a citywide cover every inlet approach is not going to fail on us in some non-trash related way. It'll capture the trash, but it'll probably go bad some other way, right? And we want to be careful how we implement that. So the report's written looking at those things as sort of discrete chunks, and we think that one can be carved up into a lot of, maybe smaller pieces that make sense, that we just haven't done that level of detail yet.
Yes. On the note of budget, and these are big ticket items here, so can staff comment on how this relates to the planned budget, and is this, are these substantial increases? What's our capacity to absorb these costs? Because they're not insignificant.
Yeah, so I believe in 2018, for the year 2019, we increased the solid waste fees, the garbage fees, to cover the cost of the infrastructure. And at that time, we were going to do full trash capture devices, large full trash capture devices. I think, if I remember right, it was like 24 million or something like that total. And so I think we're collecting like about $750,000 a year for that purpose. And so this is somewhat of a funded effort. Obviously,
and by somewhat, sorry to interrupt you, can you characterize by what?
Well, if we wanted to accomplish it all at once, we could. We don't have the money to do that.
Sure.
What I meant by that is, it's an ongoing effort, and so there may be some years we don't maybe do a project because we don't have enough money to do that project yet. But some of the inlets and so forth we can get done periodically, and I suppose if it becomes a point where we do a lot of the inlet. Individual inlet trash capture devices, and we end up with some more maintenance needs and staffing time and so forth, we'll go back and look at our funding sources and whether or not we can add a fee for those purposes as well, which I think we can. So those fees also support the street sweeping program as well. So it's all interrelated because it's all dealing with trash. So.
And the proposal here from staff and the direction that you're looking for from us is essentially directional, broad directional, as opposed to, these are the specific things that we're going to do. So I just want to make sure we're clear on what's in front of us.
Yeah, correct. I'm basically looking for feedback from you if you see any fatal flaws to this, or if you think we're on the right path, or if you felt we should focus in one area or another. But yeah, we, like Matt said, we haven't got down to the granular detail. We kind of have this broad plan in place that we can take this menu from and choose what we need to do over the course of time. Because these percentages do change as far as what's required from the board. And as Sarah inferred, we still don't know what the next permit's going to fully look like. So this kind of makes us, gives us the ability to be adaptable to that as well. So I think the plan is well done and gives us options going forward.
Great. Last question. How long have we been gathering data on the trash issue, and do we have a trend line?
I believe we've been measuring the percent reduction since 2014.
And just to characterize that a little more, percent reduction over
the 2009 baseline.
2009. So, and I'm sorry, if you go back to that first slide again. So is this saying that we have reduced from 2009 with, measured certainty that that's an over 90% reduction, or this is an extrapolated number that we think we've gotten a 90% reduction?
This is what we reported to the water board, that we're pretty certain. Yeah, we would need to be able to defend this to the water board.
That's a lot.
What that does include, though, sorry, Chair, but what it doesn't include is like the 15%, that we get for the bag ban and so forth. So we're getting credit for something that's out there that everyone's getting credit for.
Right. And presumably the let's call them non-hardware actions, like the more we change people's behavior and if we get the properties to get their act together and all of that, then that presumably would also result in a reduced maintenance cost, right? Maybe, yeah. Okay. I think that's it. Questions for me? Any other questions?
Comments, though.
Yes. Why don't we move to comments?
No, I have none.
All right.
It's a first.
All right.
TV audience at home, any call-ins? No, I don't think so.
All right. Then any further discussion?
Yeah, And the input I'll give you is that I like what you're recommending. I think it makes perfect sense, but I would try to put more emphasis on the inspection and enforcement. Try to put some real teeth there. I think that makes sense from an equity fairness point of view. You know, individuals, mostly we're talking commercial entities, should pick up their share a little more than just all of us as taxpayers. The city and I like the idea that it also, I think it leads to increased likelihood of acceptance of individual capture devices as a way to avoid getting fined all the time. And that, you know, they also have to keep, that shifts the maintenance to that commercial entity as opposed to the city as well. So that's my input. I think it's great. Good work.
So, if I may, through the chair, comment on about the enforcement and the efforts. We are requesting an additional position in next year's budget if we can get it approved to do more enforcement and inspection.
And I don't know what the fee schedule is, but going back to my days on the Park Commission and heritage trees, which, you know, is the thorniest, if somewhat silly-looking issue, but it comes up all the time. And for quite a while, the fines were so low that people just said, "Yeah, great, we're bulldozing that redwood, and let the city come after us." So that's something to bear in mind. Some folks may just say, I mean, the fees actually have to be real.
Yeah, I do think we intend to go back and look at our enforcement program on this and make sure it has the right monetary, but also the right tiered structure to give people the opportunity to make that realization, if you will, and either do it themselves in their own manner or not, and end up, getting motivated over time to do so. So we'll definitely be coming back with that.
Yeah, perfect. Nobody's looking for gotchas, speed traps, but that sounds great. Thank you.
I think I'll agree with Commissioner Robbins that the direction of the plan is good, and that it presents flexibility to fine-tune some of the more granular details. Going back to I think a comment that Matt had about solving one problem and having another is I would encourage us to think about with more precipitation and flooding impacts in the future, thinking about what systems and infrastructure we're installing and making sure that that's not causing another problem given our future climate impacts. And then also, given that the county has already adopted the disposable foodware service ordinance, that it's something for us to consider. I know that our city prides itself in being a leader in sustainability, and I know that other jurisdictions will be looking at this soon, and I know it'll be coming to us soon too. So really thinking about how this connects. And then I'd also agree on the comment with the fee schedule is making sure that that's real and enforceable. Great. Thank you.
Let's see a couple other questions or comments. I'm looking now at page 108, which has the sources of trash. And what jumps out here is that everything is in single digits. There is no 80-20 rule here to be found. So the public education piece is really, really important. And what I'm not able to find here, though, is types of trash. So how much of this is, for example, single-use containers? I can't, and it's probably in here, and I'm just not finding it. But I think that would be interesting to see. And I echo all the comments that have been made so far. I would add that I do think the source control is incredibly important. So I'm looking forward to seeing more on that. And then, as I noted earlier, probably need to look at the screens and the linkages between the behavioral opportunities, the drain opportunities. So, but other than that, I think this is seems like a quite complete strategy.
If I may comment on the sources of trash, so I think if you go back a couple more pages, like to page 111, it talks about the area 1 and is called transportation or streets, and so it looks at different things like the second bullet there talks about subareas 1P and 1R show signs of trash generation from transit stops, poor trash bin and container management.
Oh yeah, the
stops.
sources, yes, but what I'm not finding is types of trash.
Oh, types of trash, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
There's only one type.
It's trash.
There's no trash A or B or...
But presumably the number that we have in terms of the single-use container is representative of the percentage of trash that represents. Is that an accurate statement? Right, so if you control single-use containers in commercial areas, that's a definitive percentage.
So types of trash weren't part of this study specifically, but we have done quite a bit of characterization work in other communities and throughout the Bay Area over the last 7 or 8 years, as well as nonprofits have as well. And single-use foodware, in particular plastic single-use foodware, is a lion's share of what you'll see out there in pretty much every community.
So lion's share, as in that's
majority,
50%,
greater
40,
than 50%,
80.
greater than 50% of what you would find. And about 70 to 80%, it's kind of amazing actually if you look on beach data or you look in storm drains or you look up on the streets, about 70 to 80% consistently, the amount of trash by volume is plastic.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's been a huge effort, obviously, over the last few years, getting the public up to speed on plastic issues in waterways and the ocean. So it's now leading back to things like the single-use plastic work that the county's doing and Berkeley did before that and others.
Right.
Yeah. So single-use foodware is a significant portion of the overall plastic that we're finding out there.
I'll just share that as a participant of the Adopt a Block program and the citywide cleanups, I think I'll echo the comments of it's super important for education and outreach and, to continue those efforts. And it sounds like those efforts will be ramped up. And so I appreciate that that's a big part of this.
All right, and I believe you're looking for a formal motion to recommend this to the council. Is that correct?
No, this doesn't go to council.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, it's just to you all for your input and expertise.
Okay, so it's not an action
and guidance
item.
for us, yeah.
Okay. Any last comments? Okay, great work. With that, we move on to announcements.
Yes, if I may. Next month on April 8th, we'll be bringing forward to you the Climate Action Plan and the REACH codes. That'll actually be the city manager's office doing that. We had thought we'd bring back the Rail Corridor TMA annual report, but that'll be delayed until May. I believe there's supposed to be a meeting of that group this week that didn't happen, so I think we're going to need to delay it another month. So in May, we'll have that item, the stormwater activity funding analysis, and I think you requested the SBWMA overview. So that's tentatively for May, but it could be a push to June. And so there's other items on the list, but that's far enough in advance.
Okay. Any comments on the crystal ball?
Yeah, I actually have a question. There's a good chance I will not be at the April 8th meeting, and I'm wondering if it's perhaps a question for the clerk's office or for Sean, the city attorney, whether I could call in. I'm just worried about having a quorum if there's anything that you need passed.
And on that note, I'll have to recuse myself on the REACH code, so that's...
since we've literally lost one member and we're going to be down to 4, yeah.
I don't mean to speak on behalf of the clerk, but having been on another board for like 15 years and have board members call in from Malta, it's possible. It was a bad time zone, and he had to have a sign, the door in his house open in Malta with a sign saying public meeting in process, please enter. So it was officially noticed in Malta, and it was officially noticed here that he was in Malta. I think it can be done, but it's a logistical issue.
Okay, yeah, and it depends on whether you need a formal vote on anything at that meeting. If you don't, I could just call in and listen, but there's just a good chance I won't be here.
Well, so neither will Public Works because this is city manager's items, but I'll let Kathy know of that issue, and then she can reach out to you.
Okay.
So I do have one, I guess this is partly a question for my co-commissioners. It occurs to me that it might be valuable for us to get a briefing on the city budget writ large so that we can get a sense of proportion when having these conversations around these items, because it's a little bit difficult. And obviously we can go to the budget meetings for the council also, but it would actually be, for me at least, helpful to have a bit of a briefing if other commissioners agree.
Yeah, if the finance office is willing to come and give us a nice pie chart and show us a few items, that wouldn't have to be too granular.
Well, if I may, the finance director will and staff probably will be presenting a budget update to council during the study session, I believe, at the first meeting in April. I don't know that I have that exactly right. I saw that I saw the list today, the schedule today, but I don't have photographic memory, I guess, tonight. But so I know it's coming up, and so I don't know whether that would be advantageous for you to look at first, and then if you needed more information, we can go from there.
Okay, that's helpful, and it may be that, after reviewing that, another option would be perhaps a more detailed review of Public Works, again, because that's where we spend most of our time.
Yeah, and I'll make sure we get the exact date to you so that in advance, so you have plenty of time to look for that.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. Anything else? Okay.
Oh, I have an announcement. Are we there yet?
Yes.
Okay. That the Sustainable San Mateo County Awards are happening on April 2nd, and the City of San Mateo is receiving the Trailblazer Award for the REACH Code efforts and for being one of the first in California and San Mateo County to adopt local REACH codes.
That is true, except that the date is now being changed.
Okay.
So to reduce the number of public events, Sustainable San Mateo County is about to reschedule that.
Okay. Thanks, and we'll stay tuned.
All right. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Yes.
NBA.